We are here at the Amera building in the Jolt Cafe. First podcast here with the Mayflower Sports podcast, joined by Andrew McGinnis and our guest today, Ankur Gupta, owner of Jolt and young entrepreneur in the city. I just want to first give a quick shout out to Ankur for letting us shoot here. This seems to be like a place that we are going to be for a little bit, shooting and having some guests in here. We're trying to cover mostly, I would say interesting people in the city. It doesn't always have to be an athlete like Ankur, obviously young athlete beforehand, but very much a young entrepreneur in the city now, doing a lot of things and creating a lot of waves in the city. Ankur, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. Excited to be on.
Yeah.
So I think Jake knows you a little bit more than I do, but the first thing that I found out about you and just what I've known about you in the short time that we've really met is that you're a busy guy. Like, you're just going nonstop. Tell us about your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. Like, I always say to people, like, no 2 days look alike. It's kind of just depends on what I'm up to that day, like how I'm feeling. I like to have like a lot of flexibility, like with respect to being able to do things for myself while simultaneously like also being able to get things done. So, I'll always wake up in the morning and I have like sort of like a morning routine where I kind of like take like the first hour of the day to do a couple things, just make sure the day gets started right. Cause I find, if the day doesn't get started right, then like the rest of the day is going to be all jumbled up. But, day to day, I'm usually pretty busy with Scanway, which is kind of like my primary business. We're a hospitality group here in Halifax. And we do, a whole bunch of things in the food and beverage space, like Jolt Cafe being one of them. So, you'll find me here at Jolt, you'll find me at Scanway. One big thing that I'm sure we could talk about later on in the podcast is like there's just like this massive labor shortage right now in the work field where it's just hard to find good people. And people are kind of like constantly just like leaving like here and there to just like move on to the next job. So obviously that impacts my day to day because, at the end of the day, when it's your business, you have to do anything that it takes to make it happen. So, on a given day, I might think that I might have this thing lined up, but then somebody calls in sick or this happens, and then you kind of have to like run to Costco to go get some groceries, or you have to go make a delivery, or you have to, drive servers out to an event. So it really, there's no way that I can kind of like give an exact day-to-day basis, but it's mostly a lot of just like trying to keep my head above the water and making sure like things are getting done in a timely fashion, while simultaneously, still having enough time to, I think, have for myself.
Yeah, so you just obviously mentioned there, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you here. How do you manage that, like, work-life balance? Because I noticed, like, especially with us, like, starting up, like, one of the big things that I wouldn't say struggled with, but it was very hard to come to terms with is how do you make sure that you're handling the things that you need to handle while still, like, having a life, basically?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, for an individual person, like, everybody's going to be different, like, what you kind of need to be. It's like some people are more social. So for them, like, as an individual, going out, meeting people, like, that's super important. Like, I'm a big routine guy. So, for me, making, like, when I say I need to do things for myself, that's, like, making sure that I'm, like, eating, on time, getting the right meal. Like, those are, like, it's, like, simple things that I think, like, kind of, like, get overrated or like people don't like consider, but I think it's like those simple, like simplifying your life down and doing the simple things and sort of not getting bogged down in thinking like too far ahead, like making sure you stay within the day to day and every day is a day and trying to get the most out of every single day. Because I find like it's just like, you use the analogy of like when you're trying to eat, like I know I heard this one time, like if you're trying to eat a horse, you're not going to try to eat the whole thing like at one time, right? Like you're going to take it like, you're going to take it bite size and break it down and do that over a slow period of time, to which point eventually the horse will be consumed. And I think, thinking about your life in that perspective of being able to sort of simplify it down. So for me, routine's a big thing, getting to spend time with family and making sure, my business is being taken care of, making sure I'm maintaining the relationships that I'm able to with my friends. I have like people that I'm close with, sort of all over the world now because of, I lived in Toronto, I went to school in Ontario, I lived here, but, people move on and everyone sort of, I think I'm at that phase, 27 now where people have sort of settled into what their lives are going to kind of look like for the next like 10 to 15 years at the very least, right? Like they're either about to dive in with their partner or they've kind of like dove in really deeply with their career path. So, there's less time. I find individuals my age just have less time to be able to be social in that sense, and you kind of get bogged down within your own routines. But, it's obviously important to make sure you check in on those relationships and keep up with your friends as much as you possibly can.
You talk about like the labor shortage, and like one thing I read one time from Gary Vee, he talks about like don't ever try and think that your employees are going to be as invested into your business as you are, because it's your business, So how do you make those employees and those people kind of feel as if like they're a part of it and they're as valued as kind of you want them to feel?
For sure. I think one, making sure your employees are heard is important. Like they feel like they're contributing to the business. Like I have a very kind of, and so does my business partner is my father. And both of us sort of have like this approach of where we want to give you the right principles and we want to teach you the right things and sort of set you up for success. But then we want to give you the autonomy in order to be able to sort of be able to do that job yourself, as opposed to us micromanaging or getting involved and constantly being on top of people, as opposed to sort of just like letting people do their own thing and being open to suggestions of what people are kind of bringing to the table. That's, I think, how you draw ownership. I mean, the industry that I'm in, like in food and beverage, it's kind of known that it's a pretty fickle industry in the sense of like people. Like, it's just hard to have ownership when there's so much competition. There's so many restaurants. There's so many other businesses that all require the same sort of service staff. And, I mean, it's not a job that requires, you don't have to have years of skills of serving, right? Yeah. So anybody can kind of serve. And so at the end of the day, what you're looking for is somebody who's, I think, who's going to be committed, who's going to be loyal, and who's, I think, on board to understand that you have a standard that you need to maintain. And I think as long as we're able to find people that fit into that mindset and we're able to kind of give them that mindset, that's sort of, it's a give and take, right?
Do you know quickly when you find an employee like this person's going to work out or this one might be a little bit rougher?
I think it's hard to tell, to be honest with you, because like I said, I mean, people, you can have a good employee and then that employee ends up leaving because someone offers them a manager. And I mean, that's happening a lot specifically these days, is because there's such a shortage. People are paying more or offering a promotion or better hours or whatever is sort of like competitive towards like your lifestyle. And as an individual, again, you're going to make a decision based on what's best for you, right? Like, and I respect that. Like, I think that's important. That I always tell my friends and anyone that kind of comes to talk to me about like like career-wise, is that you got to do something that fits your lifestyle. Like, because you're just going to do better at that job if every day going to work isn't a chore. It isn't something that you have to do. So no, it's not always apparent off the top. And I mean, people move around a lot in the industry that I'm in particular. So it's hard to nail people down like that. But when you find good people, I mean, they tend to stay. And I think, the mentality that's worked well for us is the people that have stuck around, we've taken care of, and they feel like they're taken care of, and they take care of us. And that's sort of, at the end of the day, it's still a family business. And so that's the approach that we take with how we take care of our employees and, how we want to run our business on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's super important. That's something that's kind of like forgotten about when you own a business, is like you got to treat almost like the employees as like your kids almost, because you want them to kind of come up with you and you want to give them, like you said, responsibilities, and you want to give them opportunities to succeed, even though at the end of the day, the company still is yours, but you want them to feel like really a part of what you're doing and they have a say. But I just want to ask you, man, like we're in this beautiful building. Mm-hmm. How did Jolt come about, man?
How did Jolt come about?
Yeah, because it's for me, like it's something that I think is very unique, and I think in Halifax especially, like we're kind of lacking like stuff like this and like ideas, and it's really like refreshing to have somebody like you. Like we've known each other for a little bit now, and like we kind of reconnected a little bit later in life, but just to be able to talk to you and hear your ideas and hear what you think, like Halifax should be doing this, and like I don't understand why Halifax is doing that. You're somebody that's very in touch with, I think, kind of what the city needs. And I think little like stuff like this, like being able to provide a very high quality cafe is something that in Halifax we don't really have. There's like a couple of them sprinkled around, but I think this is something that's like really going to succeed. But can you just give me a little bit about, just maybe where the idea came from, or just how it kind of got started?
For sure. So with Jolt, I mean, we haven't officially opened up to the public yet, but we're going to be quite soon. I mean, the primary idea was to come in and partner with Emera and Nova Scotia Power and and work to be able to service their employees and their staff. And the concept and the model really fits in well with our business model, because what we do well is we go into places where there's a food and or beverage or some sort of service aspect, and we kind of can come in, bring our team, bring our menu, bring our service, bring like that high quality product to the table, and then be able to sort of like implement and execute on that in different ways. Like that might be catering, that might be managing a restaurant. In this case, it's running, like you said, a high-end cafe that kind of provides healthy options for people to consume for breakfast and for lunch. And so the rollout and kind of, you can't really see the space on camera here, but sort of the whole plan of the space has been really one to like liven up Emera's lobby, because this is their kind of main lobby area and this is their main headquarter building. So we're working within their business. So that's primary. We have to be cognizant of that idea. But secondly, it's been, a lot of the stuff that's happened up top at the cafe has been working with local partners and artists and bringing in different purveyors to provide. There's been like 5 or 6 different people that I've worked with, to provide furniture, to provide plants, to provide artwork, even like the cups and everything that we have like on the table here, like are custom made by potters in Halifax. So that was kind of like the whole goal and approach that I wanted to take, is I really wanted to highlight people in the city and make it like this cool creative space that people want to come and hang out with. And, when we open up and as we start to sort of roll out, having more and more people in this space, I think that'll come together even more, and people will come to kind of realize that like that's what this whole space is about. And I mean, speaking in terms of like what Halifax lacks, I think at the end of the day, it's about forward thinking, right? And the ideas and the approach that I bring like to my business, or sort of the things that I want to do, or that I try to do here, is simply like what is being successful in other cities, and is there a need for that product kind of in the market that you're sort of within. And I think Halifax itself has changed a lot within the last 5 years, both from a development standpoint, but also from a demographic standpoint, right? Like you see a lot more immigration. You see a lot more people, I think, during COVID have given up the dream or the want to live in Ontario. And they've said that from a lifestyle perspective, a place like Nova Scotia has so much more to offer, from the nature perspective. Plus, like, my dad always says it, like he says like Halifax is a city with a town charm. And so it kind of still like maintains that sort of vibe where you have sort of all the big city amenities, but it's not kind of overblown and overpopulated and sort of overproportionalized. But I think as much as we want to maintain that town to city sort of ratio, what the city really requires, and from a demographics perspective of just like new people, is I think things to do, like new things to see, like new events, new places to go. Like any big city that you go to, people are constantly entertained because there's always new things kind of going on.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
always events happening. Like I know you guys are big sports guys. Halifax, I think like it's great with the Wanderers. It's great with the Mooseheads. Like, could we have a professional sports team here potentially? Like, I don't know, maybe like right now is not the right time, but I think the trajectory of growth that Halifax is on, especially with the growth of like the shipyard, and I think people are starting to see Halifax as that sort of hub in between like Europe and kind of like still accessible to the US and then still accessible to the rest of Canada. So there's a lot of growth that can occur, and simultaneous to that growth, there just needs to be an aspect of, I think, entertainment and social and hospitality and everything that needs to kind of come along with it. And I think people that have lived in the city for years and years have to sort of accept that inherently things are going to change, and that change is not a negative thing. It's sort of a positive thing.
Definitely.
And I think we can continue to maintain like the essence of what Halifax is without, needing to stay the same.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And that's kind of the mentality that I always find here is like, you go on like a Halifax noise post, and whenever something like new is happening, people will always kind of there's always something to complain about.
Yeah.
And I've always found that's kind of like a mentality here versus sort of, you don't see that in other cities. People are sort of more positive about the approach of like kind of like what's happening and that the city's growing and that it's, things are changing. And that's kind of the approach that I try to take, both towards what I think Halifax needs and, I think what, my business needs.
So do you feel like some people are kind of upset with how fast city is growing? Like you talk about how it's like small town charm, but big city, like it definitely, things have changed. Like since we were kids, things have changed quite a bit. Like the different companies growing. So do you think, from your perspective, you've seen a crowd of people that are disappointed with how fast it's growing?
I think there definitely is a crowd of people, especially like if you leave Halifax and you go outside of the city, there's still sort of that, oh, you're from the big city kind of approach, right? And there's still
Man, I live in Amherst now. Like, even for me, I'm from Halifax. I drive down from Amherst, and like, I see more people on University Avenue in 30 seconds than I did all week.
Where you live, right? And then, you know, people who are from like Toronto or from New York or from other places would be like, you know, Halifax is such a small place. So it's like all comes down to perspective. But I think definitely like I think people do think like the city has changed. And I mean, there's something to be said. Like all of a sudden people were like, I think this is the issue that we're seeing. Like, you know, one example that I would take is like with rent, right? Like rent has kind of drastically increased dramatically over the last few years, but people, what they're earning hasn't sort of caught up to that, right? Like we're being charged sort of rent comparable to cities like Toronto or Montreal, but people aren't making Toronto or Montreal money. And I think that's, you know, comes down to the way that Halifax has sort of grown in this weird way where like development has seriously outpaced like job growth and economic growth.
Definitely.
And so as a result of like the fact that development has sort of taken such a quick stride, I think people have that, like you can see, like people are upset that they have to pay, and I can see their point of view as well, right? Like when you go from being accustomed to paying $800 a month for rent per month to suddenly have them pay like $1,200 or $1,600, that's a significant uptake. So I think there's definitely
compared to their salaries,
right? Like definitely compared to what people are earning, and a lot of people like. Where Halifax is sort of, I think, like unique and different as well, is like a lot of people in Halifax make their earning by working at the dockyards or working at very labor intensive, or like being a server, like very blue collar labor intensive jobs. And like the city is still made up of a lot of blue collar work. And I think that's where like the city needs to develop, is like there needs to be more kind of like tech jobs, software jobs.
Yes.
We would love to see like more companies like Amazon and these companies kind of like coming in and providing people, I think, with like different opportunities to be able to make, you know, that kind of living wage that everybody should be able to make. And I think the city needs to be doing more in terms of providing that affordable housing and providing people with there needs to be more of a cohesiveness, right? And that's where I find there's like a disconnect between like what the government feels the people want versus like what the people actually want. And
so true,
and there's like constantly, like I've always found that there's this like big disconnect in politics always. And I'm always I'm always trying to think of like why does that exist? And I think that's because, you know, there's just not enough advocacy from the community taken into play. You know what I mean? Like there's not there's more that can be done, and there's more that can be heard from what people like actually want. And I think like it's pretty clear, like to individuals like us on the ground level that are seeing like the day to day, like what the city actually needs. Like, do we need more bike lanes? Like, I don't. I don't.
Is that the biggest concern?
Yeah. I don't know if that's the biggest concern.
Definitely.
Right?
I just want to ask, man. Like, I think it's very refreshing, and like a part of the reason, like, not part of the reason, but some of the reasons why, like, I found like I started talking to you a lot more, because obviously, like, you went away for school for a little bit, and you were gone, and obviously, like, you know, life keeps moving forward. But when you came back, I was just like, obviously, social media is such a huge presence in everybody's lives at this point. It was just some of the ideas and the things that you were talking about on social media. Like, your thought process is a lot different than what is currently here in the city, and I think that's super awesome and super refreshing. I think there's a very, like you said, kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like, I find a lot of people here just love to hate. Like, a lot of people love to hate on people. They love to hate on new ideas. They love to just not
I think it's like the 9-to-5 culture. Like, people don't like people that are like entrepreneurs or don't work the 9-to-5 Monday to Friday job.
Exactly. And I just want to ask you, because like, I know like, for a minute there, like I was talking to you and you were talking to me about like, hey, like, you know, preserve your energy. Like, don't let these people kind of influence your thinking and give them any time of day. Like, how difficult is it for someone like you who's really stepped into, I would say, into your own lane amongst people that I know in my age and that we grew up with? You're very much a distinguishing figure for our age demographic, and being able to do the things that you want to do, travel, open up your own place, you know, do all the stuff you're doing with Scanway and, you know, be a part of Title League. Like, there's a lot of things that you're doing that's very refreshing to see in the city. But how do you deal with constantly, you know, people, you know, you hear people talking about you sometimes, and just address that?
Yeah, man, I think it comes down to an approach of, like, at the end of the day, people are gonna say what they have to say, and people are gonna constantly, you know, like, that's not something that you can control. And I think, like, when you give people that control over your lives, like, by, like, letting what people say and what people think constantly guide you. And I did that for a long time, like, growing up in my life. I think, you know, growing up in a place like Halifax as a person of color, like, I went to private school, you know, I was in an extremely hereditary community where kind of homogeneous almost, where, like, you know, people, like, look the same and they talk the same and they act the same. And if you don't fit that mold, then you're sort of kind of like ostracized in a way, or you're kind of like pushed aside. And so, you know, I was constantly fighting this battle. I remember growing up, is being like expressing enough of my individuality while simultaneously, like, doing enough to feel like I'm still fitting in, right? Because you know, no kid wants to go through the pain of, you know, having no friends, or not fitting in, or, you know, being the person who doesn't get invited or excluded or whatever, however many things you kind of want to talk about it. And sort of what I realized, maybe even a little too late, like growing up later on, is like the more and more control you give people to dictate like who you are as an individual by what they're saying or what you think you should do, like you're just going to end up getting caught up in that, and you're never going to actually find like true satisfaction of who you are, and you'll constantly just be chasing like the grass is greener sort of route. Like you'll constantly just be trying to appease people, trying to do this, trying to do that, to a point where I think you end up looking in the mirror and you're like, you don't even recognize kind of who you are as an individual. Definitely, dude. Right? And I think I got to, like, definitely came to that point at a couple different times in my life, and I think you just have to take a step back and look deeper within, you know. And it comes down to like, who do you want to be, and who are you happy to be, and what do you know, what I think at the end of the day, you need to be able to like be okay with who you are, right, as an individual. And I think you don't want to be a fake person, and and I think a lot of people, like, just frankly, because of the way that social media is, are able to have a personality and a persona of who they are online versus, you know, being completely different in person. Like, I always try to be authentic to who I am, whether you're talking to me, whether, you know, I'm posting something or I'm talking to somebody or I'm in a conversation or whatever it may be. I always try to kind of maintain that similar stance, and that's kind of that's the approach that I take to when I hear things. I try to ignore it, frankly. Like, it's not my business. People are gonna do what they want to do, and people are gonna say, like, I go back to what I said at the start, people are gonna say what they want to say, but as long as you, and I think if you're confident in your own lane, that's the other thing, right? Like, you have to be confident in yourself and your ability and what you're doing, to not, like, it's almost like you take like an analogy of like a tree, like the wind is blowing but you're not swaying.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to stand tall to who you are and stay true to who you are. And as long as you're able to do that, then I think irrespective of what anybody's saying, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It's always weird, man, because like similar boat, like growing up, it was like you did constantly try and fit in,
for sure,
fit in, and then like you very much later in life, it's like I got to a point, it's like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what am I, like, what am I doing? Like, why do I want to please these people so
It's crazy
much?
that being yourself shouldn't like be a hard thing to do.
No,
you know?
it should be like, or, you know, common sense is that common kind of thing. But like, yeah, these simple metrics of like, it's kind of, you like go back to like, think about like when people were cavemen, right? And like, what was like the simplicity of life? Like, it was all about like your tribe, making sure you were fed, making sure you were safe, making sure you had like a place to stay. And I think, like, you know, if you were to go back and measure how happy those people were and their level of satisfaction, I would say like it would be probably like 100 times higher than individuals like on a day-to-day basis here, even though, you know, in all things considered, life is better, you know, it's easier, like it's more, things are more accessible, you don't have to work as hard. So, you know, as things have, like, it's sort of, you see this dichotomy, right? As things have actually gotten easier, as you know, as you're actually able to access more people because of social media, as you're able to do more things and, you know, have more houses and have more money and have more, like, people are actually less happy. Like, people are actually less satisfied, and people are constantly striving for more. And you know, I'm a victim to that myself, where, you know, you see people, you go on social media and this person is doing this cool thing. You're like, oh damn, like I wish, like, you know, I could be doing
Dude,
that.
I was messaging you the whole time you were at Waste Management. I was like, fuck. Like, just for those who don't know, Ankur was at the Waste Management tournament in Phoenix, right? Yes, for the golf.
I'm wearing the hat.
I want to go to Phoenix, man.
How was that, man? Because just like that is the wildest tour event.
Dude, it was crazy,
man.
It's
the wildest tour event.
If you're a golf fan, and if you like, one thing, watching live golf, so much different than watching golf on TV. Like, any type of live sports is way better, but just the atmosphere and at that course, like, everyone's rowdy and having a good time. And, you know, you're out in Phoenix, Arizona in February, and it's like 25 degrees, like dry heat, no wind in the air. You know, you're just wearing t-shirts and shorts, like lounging by the pool. But yeah, I mean, that's like, I think there's you know, going back to like speaking about waste management or travel in general, or just like going back to what I was talking about how people are like less happy and satisfied nowadays than they were before. I think, you know, the more you simplify down your life, like, and make it less complicated with, you know, like simplifying your relationship, simplifying the day-to-day things that you're doing, I think the more and more you bring it down to like that base rudimentary level, it's actually like way easier to have like an open mind to sort of other things and opportunities and things that are kind of like going around, because you're just like not as cluttered with just much stuff. But I think secondly, it leads to like emotional conclusions where like you end up being more satisfied with like the day-to-day process of, you know, the simple things that you're doing in your life, as opposed to like constantly needing like that awesome thing to happen, or this to happen, or this accomplishment to happen, and just like always be chasing something. You sort of you come back to like where, you know, you're just satisfied in the day to day, so you don't have that feeling of like you're chasing after something, right?
I always say, like, it's such a like easy saying, but like no one's gonna believe in yourself as much as you do. Like, nobody's gonna ever believe in you or what you think or an idea you have more than you.
No,
because you're the one with the idea.
And at the end of the day, if you don't believe in the idea yourself, then why would anybody else believe in it?
Right.
Exactly. Like, that's, I think, like another important factor, and things that people don't necessarily consider all the time is like, you got to be your own champion. At the end
people
of the day.
think that like bullying is just like going on in like schools, or like even like younger, like elementary, high school, or whatever. Like, there's like quote for quote bullying. It's just different, like for adults. It's like judgmental.
It's
things,
judgmental
right?
things. Like it's just. I mean, it changes from being bullying because like no one's like outright out there like hating on you.
Yeah, it's like judgment.
It's like judgment, but it's more like judgment, right? And I think that's like another negative thing that's definitely come up in our society, where like judgment, like if you break down judgment's coming from like a place of like where you're comparing your life to like this individual's life, and then you're judging based on your life or what you think that this individual, right? Like, I think comparison is like the thief of joy. I
that's
saw
good.
that,
That's
right?
actually
like
a fucking good quote.
That's something that I've seen a lot of people talk about, and you know, I've read as well, and it definitely, the more you compare and say, oh, I wish my life was like this, or I wish, you know, I was like this, the less likely you're going to be satisfied with what's happening in your own life, right?
Definitely. I want to ask you, man, like, obviously, I know working with your dad is he's definitely an inspiration for you, but we could talk about him as an inspiration too, but who are some of the inspirations in your life to be able to, I think you've been molded into like a very, and obviously with some of your own work, a very, you know, good individual and somebody that people want to be around and obviously talk to you. Like, you know, I think a lot of people have a misconception of you, of what they see versus like the actual type of person you are. But who are just some of the people that you think like help shape some of the ideas, or just even just kind of the person you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost is my family. Like, that's, you know, that would be one of the biggest things, but then also sort of like the friends that I made at grammar. I think those were like the first, you know, those will be my day one friends for that I'll have for life. And those are kind of like the people that saw you grow up, and, you know, saw you from when you were like 10 years old to when you were, you 17 years old, and now when you're 27 years old, and although they've moved on in the sense of like everyone has their own lives and people are living all over the place, we still constantly stay in touch. So I'd say those were like growing up like the two major factors, and then in terms of other people that I respect and that I kind of like look up to, it's just people who I think chase like unapologetically chase after their dream and go after things that otherwise people would not think are possible. So like people like Elon Musk, the LeBron Jameses of the world and stuff like that, and people are constantly like, why? And it's a question that I've been asked is because like I think I've before when I was growing up it was more adoration, but now I think in adulthood it turns into like a respect because you realize like what that level of like mastery of your craft actually requires from both like a dedication perspective and from a work ethic perspective. But really, man, my main inspiration and always will be my main inspiration is my dad, and that's why I ultimately I had, like I said, I had left. I went to Queens, and then I was working in Toronto, and I'd sort of like moved on from Halifax, and the plan was never to kind of like come back. And the only reason that I did was because he kind of was like, hey, let's do this together, and let's like kind of build something for our family together. And I always knew that it was his dream to want to do something for himself. So for me to be able to be a part of that journey, that's a blessing in itself. And I think it's given me a platform to be able to build up my own brand and to be able to do things that, other people necessarily might not, have had that opportunity. So, it's always been him paving the road for me. And, my responsibility, I think, as his son is simply to be able to, give back as much as I can to him for paving that path for me. And then also, I think, laying down a foundation for, the next generation for hopefully for my kids one day where they have to struggle less and they have to work less or, still, obviously be great people and do their own thing, but, make life as simple and easy, like going back to that for them as my dad and my family have tried to make it.
What's it like working for your dad, man? Because it's always weird. So like I worked with my stepdad for maybe like 4 months. Okay. And it was the worst fucking experience I've ever had. But I'm sure it's obviously different because you guys, he didn't technically own anything that I was just working with him, right? Where you guys have your own business and you're able to kind of share ideas with each other, but some of the day-to-day stuff, like, it must be tough sometimes.
It's not all rainbows and daisies.
Do you guys talk as father-son, or is it as people that are working together, or is it apparent that you guys are related?
It depends. Is it apparent that we're not related?
No, that you are.
That we are related? Yeah, it's pretty apparent that we're related. I think people recognize that, and we have a lot of this, like, because, at the end of the day, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in the sense of, like, we're pretty similar people. Okay. And so we end up crashing and butting heads because, we're both stubborn and hard-headed sometimes and stuck in our ways. So it's never the easiest thing to work with family, but I think, like, the biggest thing that I've realized, it's definitely, like, the most rewarding, like, when things go well and it's and successful, like, you're able to, like, as a family enjoy in that success. I mean, my father and I have a great dialogue back and forth. I always do feel like, I'm being heard, and sometimes I think my expectations I think when we do have disagreements or when there's misalignment, it's as a result of misaligned expectations of how things can go. And, obviously he has way more experience in this industry than I do. He's been in it for over 30 years now, and I've almost barely just touching 5 years. So what I think is possible sometimes is not possible. Sometimes I want to run before I can jump.
That's good. It's better than being the other way around, I think.
Yeah, so it's good. So we complement each other in that sense as well, right? Because, he brings that more grounded, reserved perspective, and I sort of bring that sort of like flying up, at 10,000 feet perspective. And so we're able to sort of mesh well in that sense, and I think bring different things to the table. And, the business's success is a culmination of both. It's neither could have succeeded without the other.
I think you definitely need that too. Like, that's something like I've kind of noticed with like me, Andrew, and Noah. Noah's behind the camera for the people that can't see Noah, but Noah's definitely a part of the Mayflower sports team. But I think that's something like we've all kind of realized is that we all, you know, Andrew's a huge like forward thinker. Like Andrew's Andrew's the guy like, hey, like we're gonna be able to do this at this time. We're gonna be able to do this at this time. And I just say like sometimes I'm like, man, like I'm just walking through the day here. Like I'm just trying to get through the day. But I think that's super necessary to be able to try and build a business, because if you have somebody that like me that's only, you know, focused on like the one thing at a time, you're never going to be able to expand and grow and reach your goals. And if you have somebody maybe just like Andrew, if there was just a huge forward thinker, you wouldn't be able to be like, do the process the right way.
Any successful team, you need like people who bring different perspectives to the table, right?
Definitely.
And you're not going to be successful if everyone has the same skill set. And so I think that's why, you know, it works well with the father-son team that we have at Scanway, is because we both have different skill sets and we both bring different things to the table.
Definitely. Yeah. What are like, I know you're a huge traveler, so what's it like to be able to kind of, you know, go experience these different places? Because I always think like you know, at the start of my life, I wasn't much of a traveler. I was very much rooted here, and I didn't know anything outside of Halifax. You know, I had a couple trips to Toronto to go see aunts, but like still never really like gone and experienced anything. And that's something like knowing you and like seeing the social media is you're very much somebody that likes to travel and experience and really like dive into culture of the city. So how important is that to you to be able to go experience those types of things and be able to be a part of those cities, even if it's, you know, you're there for 3 days, a week, you know, a month, however long you're there?
For sure. Well, whenever the travel thing is my parents, because my parents lived all across the world. They lived in China, they lived in Australia. And so they did a ton of traveling growing up, like, you know, when they were growing up and right before having us. And once we were born, they did a good job of always kind of like taking us around places and stuff. So I've been back like home to India like 4 or 5 times. I've traveled through Europe. I've traveled through North America. And I think, you know, now in adult life, traveling allows you to gain like that different perspective that then you can bring back to your own city. Like for me, traveling is great because I get to see like what are other people thinking about, what are all these other ideas, like other creative stuff that I can kind of mesh and bring to my own, almost like, you know, you want to use the analogy of sort of like canvas, right? Like every and so whenever I go to a city, I always try to experience it from like a non-tourist perspective. Like I try to kind of like dive in, like you said, to the culture, like really get in with the food, meet people. And, you know, personally, I like to spend my money on experiences. So like traveling to me is an experience. Like I'd way rather spend money on that than spend money on, you know, going out or whatever it may be. Like traveling, I think that's sort of where I budget the rest of my funds that I have. So, you know, going to these cities, getting to experience them, but mostly, like, for me, because I knew I like traveling, I've tried to build my career in a way that allows me to be able to do that, and you know, be able to go places. And I've always wanted to be, like, not attached to one city, like, while I might live in Halifax. And, you know, that was always the plan, like, when I moved back and then COVID happened. And, you know, that obviously, like, completely different story.
Couldn't do anything.
Had to be in, you know, one place. But I like to be able to bounce around. It gives me a fresh perspective of also when I come back to Halifax.
It really does.
I find I come back refreshed, and
Definitely.
You know, you have a different perspective on the city. And I think everybody, you know, it's not something that everybody can do, but I think if you have the ability to do it, like, you know, being able to travel is definitely one of the like main things that I say. Like I think that has shaped and molded me. Like I did this great backpacking trip with a couple of my friends from Grammar. After first year in Europe, and like that was like a big trip for me in terms of, you know, shaping who you are as an individual. And that's really kind of when you, I think, learn a lot more about yourself and, you know, who you are and what you can do. And when you're in an unknown city and it's just you on your own, kind of have to figure it out for yourself. Like that's sort of like kind of also like a testament.
What's your favorite place in Europe?
My favorite place in Europe. I mean, I love the big cities like Paris and Barcelona, but there's this nice little western coastal town in Spain called Saint Sebastian, and it's like right on the water, and there's these beautiful mountains and coves, and it's just amazing place. And I'm hoping to get back to Europe like later on this year. We'll see. But yeah, man, like I mean, traveling is I think a lot of people talk about it as being one of those rewarding experiences that then you can also like look back on and cherish, right? Like it's something that kind of gets locked in, like in the moment it's great, but also like, you know, something that you have to
You're able to reflect on. And like for me and Andrew, like, we just got back from Vegas in March, and that was, like, the furthest I've ever been from Halifax. And, like, coming back, it was, like, holy shit. Like, that was actually, like, a crazy experience that, like, you know, the two other buddies that we went with, we're going to be able to talk about that till the day we die.
Exactly, right? It's an experience that you now have, like, with your friends and that you can kind of experience till, like, constantly. And I think I find you really, like, the people that you go on trips with, you really form, like, really solid bonds
Definitely.
and friendships.
It's
with
just
and
different when
everything
you're
as
away
well.
for some reason.
Yeah, when you're away with people and everything like that. So it's a different, it's a big world out there, right? Like, when you don't leave the place that the place that you sort of live, you get jaded and locked into thinking like that's like how everything is like everywhere
Yeah.
else around the world.
That's
right?
how
And-
I was.
Well,
man.
it made me laugh because, like, the first time I was in Vegas and when Jake and I were there, we were laughing because, like, we told everybody, like, well, Jake would say, like, you know where Halifax is? And I was like,
Yeah.
nobody's going to know where Halifax
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
You know, like, I
Zero
always
fucking
start with
chance.
Eastern Canada,
Eastern Canada.
and then I go to Nova Scotia,
Scotia, yeah.
and then I take a long shot with Halifax. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, maybe they know Halifax.
they
But
know Halifax.
I always laugh, like, you're in the States or anywhere. Like, go down south to a resort, and it's like, you're from Canada? Like, how's Toronto?
Yeah.
Or how's Vancouver? It's like, that's not just what Canada is, you know? But, like, my
Yeah.
favorite part about Vegas, besides all the fun you can have, is, like, you meet people from all over. It's obviously, a touristy place.
It's one of
right?
those places, yeah.
You're not just meeting, like, people that are, like, local, you know? So, like, you talk about that fresh perspective when you come back, you know, to Halifax. I feel so much pride from being where I'm from. But I love, like, seeing, like, there's such a bigger pond out there than kind of
Yeah,
where we
bigger
are. And you come back here and you want to bring what you've learned. Like, do you, like, obviously, you know, your travels, like you mentioned, have kind of helped you and everything like that. But do you feel like that when you go away and you come back that you almost feel like rejuvenated and like ready to like take something that you saw somewhere else and bring it here?
Absolutely. Like, I think I feel rejuvenated. I feel more like I feel inspired, like from what I've seen, to be able to bring that to Halifax and, you know, more so have other people be able to experience that thing that I got to experience, right? Like, the more you can make things accessible. Like, for me, it's through food. So whenever I go to a place, like, I'll always try to go to, like, you know, all the you know, dope food spots in that area and try a bunch of, like, the local cuisine. And then my mind just kind of like starts thinking, it's like, okay, like, how can a place like Halifax, you know, work this into what we love and what we have here? And, you know, definitely stuff with Jolt, like some of the ideas for Jolt, some of the ideas for, you know, things we do at Scanway, some of the projects that we have coming up, like, that's all been inspired through, like, trips and travel. And you know, I think it's an important thing that everybody should do.
Definitely. Just, I think we're almost wrapped up here, but I just want to ask you just a quick, like, basically, like, outside of, you know, traveling, what else do you do for fun, man? Because I know, like, we've talked a lot about golf, and so we know both
For
pretty
sure.
big golfers, but what are some of the things that you like to do just in your spare time to kind of take your mind off of work, even though I'm sure, as we both know,
Time-consuming.
as an entrepreneur and trying to get a business off the ground, like, it's
kind of
always on your mind.
Always all on your mind and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, like you said, a big sports guy. I love watching like a great, like, I'm into film and cinema, so I love watching like a great movie. Also love to, you know, constantly be learning about new stuff. So, like, you know, I think we were talking off camera before about like Twitter, and, you know, love being on Twitter and learning about new things and kind of what's going on in the world. Because I think, again, it's just the more I always go back to an analogy that one of my mentors when I was growing up taught me about, like, being a sponge and, like, just constantly being a sponge of, like, absorbing knowledge and information. And so that's, you know, that's what I love to do. So, like, the more that I can, you know, whether that's through meeting people, that is through reading stuff, or, you know, whatever that may be, that's kind of what I love to do. And then, yeah, like, golf, like, as of late, from a sports perspective, like, I love to golf, and that's kind of
everybody's
been getting
golfing
into.
now, man. It's
I
crazy.
love
Like,
it.
I'm a part of it too.
Yeah.
Like, I've only started in like the last like probably like 3 or 4 years, but like
Yeah,
once you
everyone's
kind of
got
like
the
get
bug.
the hang
Everyone's
of
got
it,
the
it's just a
bug.
bug, man.
Yeah.
You're just like, fuck, I'd love to be out of the
I'd love
course
to be out of the
today.
course.
My favorite
Yeah,
part
yeah.
about golf is that, like, all like three of us could be out together. We could be all different skill levels, but
Yeah.
still have fun.
Still have a
Versus
good
if we
time.
all went to play a sport that like you were good at, but Jake and I weren't, like, it's like we stick out, you know?
I was talking to somebody about that the other day, about how golf is like this weird paradox where, like, from a financial perspective, it's not very accessible, but from an athletic perspective, it's like very accessible. Like, you can be any athletic, any body type, any shape, kind of thing like that, and it, you know, you can play golf.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to afford to be able to play it, right?
yeah.
Which is, it'd be great to find a way to make that game more accessible to people.
Definitely.
That's the next venture. There we
Yeah.
go.
So since we're on the topic here, we're probably almost wrapping up. But I've been talking to everybody about this. I don't care if you watch golf a little bit or a lot,
Yeah.
but like obviously with like the Live Tour
and stuff.
I'm somebody like I'm of the perspective of I'm somebody that hates politics in sports.
Yeah.
Because you get yourself down a worm or a rabbit hole, sorry, where it's like, okay, if you're gonna get mad at them for the type whatever their culture may be or how their funds come about, like you could start diving into about Nike and different, and then it's just like a huge topic that kind of takes away from the game. What are your thoughts on the Live Tour? Because I think you should be able to go get the most money you can for the least amount of work, and that's what the Live Tour is. It's eight events.
Jake's just saying, go get paid.
Like it's eight events to go, and you're not going to miss any majors. Like Live's
the
not.
PGA is banning them, right? Like
they're trying to, and like that's I don't
right?
get it. Yeah. It's like why? It's like let those guys go get money.
Staying salty.
Because at the end of the day, the majors are always going to have the history. Once you get so much money, it doesn't become about money anymore. It becomes about status, pedigree, and kind of your legacy that you're leaving behind.
Yeah.
So like, go let those guys get that money and come back for the important events.
So I think it's whatever. Like I don't think it should be as big of a deal as it is. Obviously, the PGA has a vested interest in making sure and protecting kind of like that's their intellectual property, basically, right? Like that's their product.
Yeah.
So if the players start to leave, obviously the PGA Tour is, going to be worried, kind of thing like that. But, if you look at the perspective of just because they're that good at golf or any sport, like at the end of the day, they're individuals and they're doing a job. And if a company's offering you to pay you more to do that job, then, how can you be?
It's like you were saying earlier.
How can you? Like people, how you can't really blame the individual because like that's going to be the best for your needs. Like, but touching on legacy and stuff like that, I think that's the reason why guys like Tiger and stuff don't really care because they've made so much money already in the sport. So I see the Live being great for players that maybe are not getting the attention or are not making as much money. But for guys like Phil Mickelson and Brooks Koepka, like how much money do you need to make?
Yeah.
At a certain point, like is also kind of I think something that I've seen be thrown out there. So I'm kind of like of both minds where it's like like it makes sense and you should do it, but I also think that golf is this game of like prestige and legacy and all that kind of still matters. So it's about how do you evolve the game because the game has obviously changed with all these new people that have come into the sport, but still maintain those traditions at the same time.
And I think it's a good way, like for I'd say like the Middle East to be able to kind of get themselves into North American sports. And I think North American sports have taken pretty much over the globe, like everywhere, like, basketball is huge around the world. Hockey, it has its pockets in Europe and stuff like that. But like, I think of the Live Tour basically as a Champions League of golf.
Of golf, right.
Where it's like you have, maybe you have some of the best players, you have, some smaller teams from around the world, but it gives a chance for everybody to get noticed at once and make additional funds.
It's a different format as well.
Exactly.
Which is what I like, like there are more ways
it is different
to play,
golf.
like straight up head-to-head golf. Like when you're playing scramble golf or you're playing, like as a team, like it's completely different the strategy that you take on.
And the shotgun tee time, like I think that kind of brings, obviously we live in a day and age where attention spans are short. So instead of having these like 7, 8, 9 hour events, it's 4.5 hours and you get to kind of just get in and get out. And I think you made a good point about, like guys like Brooks and Phil, it's like, why do they need to go? But at the end of the day, I feel like they're at a point in their lives where it's like, and I think DJ said it in an interview. He was like, why would I play more golf for less money?
Less money.
Yeah.
That's always DJ's perspective too,
yeah.
though, right? And Brooks. Brooks says that he doesn't even practice.
Brooksy.
He just goes out there and he just plays, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy to be that talented at a game where you don't even have to like practice at it. But
I wish.
I wanted to ask you, Ankur, more, but I have a couple more questions to you. You talked about like grammar school. Talked about grammar school and like those like your day ones, and I wanted to like jump in when you said that, but I like to I never want to be someone to like, I want to let you finish your thought, but at the end of the day, I don't want to forget to ask you the question I was thinking. And I guess, Jake and I have known each other for years. Like I think I've known him longest out of anybody,
Pretty
really.
much our whole lives, to be
And
honest. Yeah.
you talk about like your day ones, like, everyone goes in different directions. Some people getting married, like having jobs here, moving. Obviously you came back to Halifax after going to university somewhere else, but you just tell me what it's like going to grammar. I know for us, like being in like public school, we're always thinking like, oh, the private school kids, Sacred Heart Grammar School.
Before you go, grammar by a mile had the best dances.
The best dances.
By
Everybody
a
knows
mile.
that.
The grammar dances were absolutely insane.
That is grammar was known for.
But like
that.
through sports, you could probably meet like people that were in public schools and stuff
yeah,
like that.
for sure. So I had a lot of friends, like, because I played club soccer and I played for high school varsity ball and soccer and everything like that. So I definitely had a lot of friends. And then I grew up in Clayton Park.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of friends outside of the grammar sphere growing up. But because, these were the guys that I was spending, every day with, day to day, they kind of obviously become your default sort of day one friends. And then I went to grammar from grade 2 all the way to grade 12. So being at the same school, you kind of see the same people, see the same faces. Going to private school was never my decision. Like, it was never kind of, I didn't really ever have a choice in it. It was always something my parents wanted for us. I think looking back, there's definitely like positive and negatives, like with anything, like overall. Like, I can't speak to the public school experience, obviously, because I never went. But I do think because of like the smaller class sizes, and the more kind of like smaller just group of people that you're with, the friendships and the relationships that you're able to form are kind of more intimate and a little more deeper. And that's why I sort of, although I have friends that are like from that group that are in San Fran, that are like in New York, some are in here, we're still, like I said, we still have our group chat that's going strong, 10 years later from high school.
Do you feel like grammar could potentially like build more entrepreneurs, and like private school could build more people like as individuals than public schools?
I think 100%.
I think what private school does, right, is it teaches you the right principles of kind of how to succeed in life and like how to succeed at life. Like, like for example, like being an all-rounded individual, like not just being kind of like pigeonholed into one thing. So being about like the arts and the athletics and the academics, but then also like, like your network and, who is very important and all that kind of stuff. And then how to actually just like be able to put your head down and work and grind. I think that's all. So they teach you like these right principles that if you learn them properly, then are the same sort of principles that are required to be, I think, like an entrepreneur and successful. Like, I personally don't really like that word entrepreneur. Like, I think it's overused in our day and age. Like, I think anybody working for themselves, trying to do something on their own, it can be no matter how big, no matter how small. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I think that the word entrepreneur sort of gets thrown around for like
everyone's an entrepreneur these days.
Yeah,
right?
like everyone.
Do you think you can read a book on how to be an entrepreneur? It's like a bike; you got to do it. You got to get out there and try.
I think it's something more that you got to do and try. Like, I don't think you can read and read and read, but I think it's through trial and error that you end up actually understanding. And I think that like in any business, whether it's like food or it's software or it's sports or it doesn't matter. Like it's through trial and error, you figure out if what you're doing makes sense, if what you're not doing makes sense. You can't just kind of like constantly be theorizing. Right. You have to see the actual conclusion of your procedure, right? Like,
what's like the best advice you'd give someone trying to start a business?
The best advice I'd give someone, just start.
Yeah.
In all honesty, like that's
just dive in.
Just dive in, like, because that just find a place to start somewhere, like no matter how small, and kind of iterate and build from there. Like, don't get caught up in constantly just wanting to do something.
Yeah. Sweet. And I think the biggest thing too is like something that Andrew was really good at with me, because Andrew is somebody he's his own business outside of what we do. We don't have to get into what he does, but he was somebody for me where it was like, trust the process. Like, you're not just going to be here overnight.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
you have to trust the process and don't give up on it. Like, just because you might not be seeing the results you want to see at any given time, it's like, you never know when that break's going to come. You never know if like, hey, I stopped this week, like next week could have been when you blew up.
You never knew.
And you just stopped.
I think just keeping at it, but strategically, right? Like making sure that you're working towards like a goal, and but yeah, getting started is always the big thing, man.
Yeah, I think that's huge because like we talked about it for a while, like doing something like this and getting our own company off the ground, and then it was one day Andrew was just like,
let's do it.
Are we doing it or not?
Yeah,
like, you
absolutely.
know, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah,
It's like,
sure.
let's start it, and then we can kind of go from there. But I don't know if you have anything else. I think excellent conversation, to be
appreciate it.
honest. I
No,
think this
thanks
is,
for having me.
This is
Appreciate
this is our first episode, obviously, of the
pilot.
Mayflower Sports podcast here. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, like we said, with people from around the city, with like Ankur, with cool stories that don't necessarily always have to be about sports. I think that's the big thing that we're trying to get into now is a lot more. There's a lot more going on in the city than sports, and I feel like that's something in Halifax that we get very bogged down is like the athletes, and we don't really talk about, like you said, like the arts or the musicians or just entrepreneurs, even though you hate the word, but
Startups.
we call it startups or just doing your own thing, right? So we'll definitely be doing more of this. You want to give a plug for anything? Just obviously we're here at Jolt. You can let the people know where we are.
We're like right across the street from the Westin. So if you want to get a great cup of coffee or a sandwich or a bowl or just a great bite to eat, please stop in.
Yeah, and obviously Scanway too. Scanway's. I've been seeing you guys pop up a lot more, doing a lot more things, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
I saw that you guys just had a. Was it a partnership with Brunello?
With Brunello,
Yeah,
yeah.
nice.
So we're doing some more stuff at Brunello.
Golf,
We're
see,
into
there you
golf.
go.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
into golf. I mean, there's a lot to do around golf beyond golf.
Yeah.
Social aspect.
Social
right?
aspect to it as well.
But yeah,
No,
I
thanks
guess
for having me.
not a
guys.
problem.
Thanks for your
Anytime.
time.
We always appreciate it. That's going to be episode 1 of Mayflower Sports Podcast. We hope to bring you more people like Ankur who have really cool stories, and thank you for watching.